The gunshot tore the afternoon wide open. For a split second, the world held its breath. Then chaos exploded. Children screamed and dropped their backpacks. Parents gasped and grabbed for their sons and daughters. Teachers froze mid-step, mouths open but silent. Somewhere, a car alarm began blaring, shrill and mindless. And in the center of it all, Daniel Carter saw the unthinkable. His daughter Lily, small, fragile, impossibly brave, staggering backwards, her pink walker rattling on the concrete, a brilliant red bloom staining the white cotton of her t-shirt. Daniel's body moved before his mind could catch up. He was out of his truck, sprinting across the blacktop, his boots hammering a frantic rhythm against the ground. The scent of burnt gunpowder stung his nose. The acrid tang of fear filled his mouth. 20 feet. 15. 10. He closed the distance in a blur, every step burning into his memory like seared photographs. The image of Karen Monroe, standing stiff and wild-eyed by her SUV, the smoking pistol dangling from her hand. The look of horror blooming across nearby parents' faces. The way Lily's knees buckled and she crumpled to the ground, her walker skidding sideways with a metallic clatter. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, the impact jarring through his bones. His hands, steady hands that had once bandaged battlefield wounds by flashlight, shook as he tore off his jacket and pressed it hard against the gaping wound in her shoulder. "It's okay, Lily," he rasped, voice cracking. "Stay with me, baby. Daddy's got you." Her eyes fluttered open, wide and glassy with pain. "Daddy, the angry lady, S.H. shot me." She whispered, each word a struggle. Daniel's heart shattered. He could feel the sticky warmth of her blood soaking into his palms, could see her tiny chest hitching with shallow breaths. Karen Monroe still hadn't moved. The reality of what she'd done seemed to crash over her in waves. She let the gun slip from her fingers. It clattered against the pavement, a hollow, chilling sound. Then, as if awakening from a nightmare, she spun on her heel, wrenched open her car door, and fled. Tires shrieked. Rubber burned. The black SUV fishtailed wildly, barely missing a cluster of stunned bystanders as it tore away from the curb. "Get that plate." Daniel bellowed over his shoulder, not daring to move his hands from Lily's wound. "Call 911. A teacher shrieked, fumbling for her phone. Within seconds, a crowd swarmed them, parents, teachers, strangers. Faces loomed over Daniel, horrified, helpless, weeping. He heard snippets of their voices, disjointed, surreal. "Oh my God. She shot her. Is she breathing? Is she breathing?" Sirens wailed in the distance, too slow, too far. Daniel pressed harder against the wound. Lily whimpered, but didn't pull away. Her strength was fading. "Focus, Carter. Focus." A memory punched through his mind. A dust-choked battlefield half a world away, a bleeding comrade in his arms, the frantic rush to stop the bleeding before it was too late. He forced his breathing to slow, forced his hands to steady. "You're okay," he whispered again and again, willing it to be true. "You're okay, baby. Daddy's here." The ambulance skidded to a halt at the curb, red and blue light strobing across the stunned faces of the crowd. Paramedics burst out, equipment bags swinging from their shoulders. Daniel barely registered handing Lily over. He stumbled back, hands slick with blood, watching as they worked with ruthless efficiency, oxygen mask, pressure bandages for line. "Sir, ride with us," a paramedic barked, grabbing his elbow. He didn't remember getting into the ambulance. Didn't remember the doors slamming shut behind him. He only remembered Lily's tiny hand searching for his in the chaos, finding it, and clinging with desperate strength. As the siren screamed and the city blurred past outside the windows, Daniel bowed his head over their joined hands and made a silent, furious vow. He would tear down the walls of this town, stone by stone, if that's what it took to make them pay. The emergency room doors slammed open with a metallic shriek. Daniel stumbled through them in a half-daze, Lily's gurney rolling ahead, surrounded by a flurry of blue scrubs, and clipped medical orders barked into the charged air. BP dropping. "Get 2 units, ONEG ready. She's going into shock." Daniel was pushed aside, a firm but not unkind nurse herding him toward a plastic chair along the pale yellow wall. He collapsed into it, his hands still stained crimson. His jacket, the one he had pressed against Lily's wound, lay forgotten on the blood-slick floor. He could hear everything and nothing all at once. The beeping of monitors, the slap of rubber soles against tile, the muttered curses of doctors fighting to keep his daughter alive. Someone tried to ask him questions. A clipboard hovered in front of his face. Insurance, emergency contacts, consent forms. He stared through the nurse like she wasn't there. "Sir, we need your signature." His hand moved mechanically, scribbling something that resembled his name. It felt obscene. His little girl was bleeding out 15 feet away, and someone needed him to fill out forms. A sob tore loose from his throat, ragged and involuntary. He clamped a hand over his mouth to stop the sound. Not here. Not now. Time lost meaning. Minutes, maybe hours later, a doctor approached, her face grave but calm. Daniel lurched to his feet. "She's stable for now," the doctor said, her voice low. The bullet grazed her shoulder, no major artery damage. "She lost a lot of blood, but she's young, strong. She's going to need rest, physical therapy, but she should recover." Daniel nodded, 1,000 emotions crashing over him. Relief, rage, gratitude, despair. "Can I see her?" "In a few minutes. We're getting her cleaned up, comfortable. There's someone who needs to speak with you first." The air shifted. Daniel turned and found himself face to face with a man in a navy blue uniform. Officer Alan Jenkins, badge gleaming, expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter," Jenkins said, flipping open a small notepad. "I understand you witnessed the incident." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He fought the urge to snarl. Witnessed it? He'd lived it, breathed it, would relive it every time he closed his eyes for the rest of his life. "I saw Karen Monroe shoot my daughter at point-blank range," Daniel said, his voice flat and deadly calm. "And then she fled the scene." Jenkins scribbled something down. "Multiple witnesses corroborate your account," he said. "We've apprehended Mrs. Monroe at her residence." Good. For about 3 seconds, Daniel felt the tiniest flicker of satisfaction. Then Jenkins shifted, glancing away, clearing his throat. "However, she's claiming the shooting was an accident," he said. "She says your daughter damaged her vehicle, and she feared for her safety." Daniel stared at him. "My daughter," he said slowly, dangerously, "is 7 years old. She walks with a damn medical device. She couldn't attack anyone if she tried." Jenkins gave a thin, uncomfortable smile. "I understand your anger, sir. But Mrs. Monroe has influential connections in this town. Her husband, Robert Monroe, is friends with the police chief." Daniel finished, his voice dripping acid. "Yeah, I know." Jenkins straightened, offended. "An investigation will proceed. We're treating this as a possible case of negligence, pending review." Daniel laughed, a short, ugly sound. Negligence. Not assault. Not attempted murder. He looked at the man standing before him. Not a shield, not a sword, but a paper wall designed to crumble at the first strong gust. "Save your breath," Daniel said coldly. "I'll be filing my own reports. And you can tell your chief that this isn't over." He turned on his heel, ignoring whatever Jenkins muttered after him, and stormed down the hall toward Lily's room. Lily looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. A line of stitches snaked across her shoulder beneath fresh white bandages. Her face was pale but peaceful, her breathing steady under the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Daniel sank into the chair beside her, all the rage bleeding out of him, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. He took her hand carefully, afraid to hurt her, and just sat. Memories flashed unbidden. Lily learning to walk again after her diagnosis, clinging stubbornly to her tiny walker. Lily painting the sidewalk with chalk rainbows the day after her mother's funeral. Lily beaming up at him after winning the school science fair, cradling a lopsided volcano model she'd built herself. She had fought so hard to survive. And now this town, this rotten, corrupt machine, wanted to bury her pain under politics and privilege. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. Not this time. Not his daughter. Later that evening, after Lily drifted into a medicated sleep, Daniel stepped into the hospital corridor. He needed air. Space. He needed a plan. The elevator chimed open, and there, waiting by the vending machines, was Tom Delaney. Tom was an old friend, a neighbor, a man who had never bent the knee to Karen Monroe and her petty tyranny. "I heard," Tom said simply, his voice rough. Daniel nodded. "They're already trying to cover it up," he muttered. Tom's jaw hardened. "You were Army, right? Rangers. 2 tours. Then you know?" Tom said quietly. "Sometimes, the only way to win is to fight smarter than they ever expect." He handed Daniel a small USB drive. "What's this?" "Everything I've dug up on Karen and her husband over the past year," Tom said grimly. "They're not the saints they pretend to be. Dig deeper. You'll find what you need." Daniel closed his fingers around the drive. In that moment, something cold and dangerous settled inside him. Not the wild, explosive anger he had felt at the schoolyard, but something slower, sharper. A soldier's patience, a father's fury, a storm gathering at the edge of the world. He would find the truth. He would rip the rot from the heart of this town. And by the time he was finished, the Monroes would wish they had never touched his daughter. The storm began that night. Daniel sat alone at his battered kitchen table, the hospital bracelet still wrapped around his wrist, the USB drive Tom had given him gleaming dully under the low kitchen light. Outside, the world slept, but inside him, something had awakened, a cold, calculating force that once had guided him through minefields and ambushes and firefights halfway across the world. He had not worn a uniform in years, but the skills had never left. They had simply slept, waiting. Now, they stirred. He plugged the USB into his old laptop, fingers steady. A folder opened, revealing a trove of documents, photographs, receipts, emails. Evidence. Real, damning, explosive. Tom had been busy, and sloppy Karen Monroe had been arrogant enough to leave a trail. The first discovery was almost laughably easy, the HOA financial records. Daniel scanned them quickly, his military mind spotting the inconsistencies faster than any civilian accountant ever would. Thousands of dollars in administrative fees listed on dates that coincided suspiciously with luxury vacations Karen and her husband Robert had taken. Aspen, Turks and Caicos, Napa Valley. Private jets. 5-star hotels. Gourmet restaurants. All paid under the guise of community outreach or property improvement seminars. Daniel snorted. If they had been soldiers, they would have been court-martialed. But that wasn't all. There were emails, so many emails. Tom had intercepted them somehow, maybe through a sympathetic insider or a backdoor access into the HOA servers. Daniel didn't ask. He didn't care. What mattered was what they contained. In one chain, Karen Monroe had written directly to the police chief's wife, offering to overlook minor zoning violations at the chief's newly renovated vacation home, provided certain special favors were reciprocated. In another, she had described Lily in chilling, dehumanizing terms. That crippled brat lowers the property values. Why should the rest of us suffer because of some defective kid? Daniel's hands curled into fists so tight his knuckles cracked. But the worst was yet to come. Buried deep in a legal filing from 5 years earlier, Daniel found an old lawsuit, one that had never made it to trial. A family 2 streets over had sued Karen Monroe for harassment after their son, who had autism, was banned from the neighborhood playground under Karen's orders. She had claimed his erratic behavior was unsafe for normal children. The family had settled quietly. No headlines. No justice. Just a check and a gag order. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, rage boiling under his skin. This wasn't about a parking dispute. This wasn't about a scratch bumper. Karen Monroe had built an empire of cruelty, one child at a time, hiding behind fake smiles and charity dinners. And now, she'd shot a little girl. His little girl. There would be no settlement this time. No gag order. No quiet surrender. Daniel Carter was going to bring the whole rotten structure crashing down around her ears. By sunrise, he had a plan. First, he needed to secure the evidence, backups, physical copies, hidden caches and places even a corrupted police chief couldn't reach. He burned 3 copies of the USB contents, one hidden at Tom's house, one mailed anonymously to a friend he still trusted from his army days, a federal investigator, and one locked inside a fireproof safe bolted under his bed. Second, he needed allies. And not the polite, hand-wringing kind. Real allies. Angry ones. He pulled up the neighborhood chat app, the same place where rumors about Lily had first spread like wildfire. Carefully, he crafted a post. To the residents of Marigold Heights. You know what happened at Franklin Elementary. You've heard the lies. You deserve the truth. HOA funds have been misused. Children have been targeted. Evidence exists. If you care about justice, meet me tonight at the old church hall. 7 p.m. No HOA board members allowed. Simple. Direct. A spark aimed straight at the powder keg. Within minutes, replies flooded in. First a trickle, then a deluge. I'm in. About time someone stood up to them. Is Lily okay? We want to help. Bring the receipts. We'll bring the fire. Daniel allowed himself a grim smile. Good. Because fire was exactly what this war would require. The meeting was standing room only. Dozens of neighbors crowded into the creaking wooden pews of the abandoned chapel, the same place Karen Monroe had once tried to bulldoze to make way for a tennis court. They came angry. They came scared. But most of all, they came ready. Daniel stood at the front, a battered laptop hooked to an ancient projector, the damning evidence blazing across the cracked wall like holy scripture. He showed them the financial fraud. He showed them the corruption. He showed them the vile emails attacking Lily and others. By the time he finished, the room was vibrating with fury. "You said nothing because you were afraid," Daniel said, voice low but powerful. "But now you know. Fear is their weapon. Our silence is their shield. We break both. Tonight." A roar of agreement filled the hall. Plans were made quickly, cleanly, ruthlessly. A petition would circulate demanding Karen's immediate removal from the HOA board. A formal complaint would be filed with the state attorney general's office, bypassing the local authorities entirely. A fund would be raised to cover legal expenses, with pledges pouring in faster than Daniel could track. And perhaps most crucially, parents would demand full access to the school's surveillance footage, forcing the school board, and by extension the city council, to act. For the first time since the shooting, Daniel felt something heavier than rage settle into his bones. It was purpose. It was hope. It was the beginning of war. Karen Monroe did not go down quietly. The backlash began within 24 hours of the town hall meeting. At first, it was almost laughable. Anonymous letters slipped under Daniel's door accusing him of endangering the community, vandalism in the form of a dead rat nailed to his fence post, and a string of online rumors hinting that he was an unstable, violent ex-soldier exploiting his daughter's injury for sympathy. But Daniel had expected this. He had prepared for it. He kept receipts. He kept copies. Every threat, every lie, every act of petty retaliation was documented with the cold, clinical precision of a man who knew that real wars weren't won on the battlefield, they were won in the court of public opinion. And yet, he underestimated just how far Karen would go when cornered. It started with the whisper campaigns, subtle poison trickling into the ears of people Daniel had once considered friends. Lily wasn't safe to be around. Daniel was too aggressive, too unstable, bad for the neighborhood. Invitations to birthday parties dried up. Playdates vanished. At the grocery store, Daniel could feel eyes following him down the aisles, weighing him, judging him. Some days, he wanted to shout, to smash the carefully cultivated illusions they clung to like life rafts. But he didn't. He remembered something an old ranger sergeant had once told him. "When you're taking flak, Carter, it means you're over the target." And he was right over the heart of Karen Monroe's rotten empire. Then came the more serious moves. Daniel received a summons to a surprise code violation hearing for his property. Improper lawn maintenance. Unauthorized fence modifications. Disturbing the peace. Each fine was stacked neatly atop the last, death by 1,000 paper cuts. He wasn't the only one. Neighbors who had dared to attend the meeting found themselves harassed, cited, and, most chillingly, threatened with foreclosure for fabricated violations. Karen had activated her network. Petty bureaucrats, city officials indebted to her husband's bank, HOA enforcers drunk on small power. The message was clear. Fight us, and we will destroy you. Daniel refused to bend. Instead, he escalated. He filed official complaints with the State Department of Housing. He contacted local journalists willing to dig deeper, off the record at first. He partnered with an advocacy group for families with special needs children, bringing an entirely new wave of scrutiny to Marigold Heights. And quietly, behind the scenes, he prepared the kill shot. A federal lawsuit alleging civil rights violations, embezzlement, harassment, and endangerment of a minor. It was a slow game, a brutal game. But Daniel Carter had played worse and won. Still, even he wasn't prepared for the bomb Karen Monroe was about to drop. It happened 2 weeks after the meeting. Daniel returned home late from another round of strategy sessions to find 2 police cruisers parked outside his house, their red and blue lights painting the dark street in manic flashes. Lily was nowhere in sight. His stomach turned to ice. He barely registered the shouting neighbors, the uniformed officers shouting commands, the sharp slap of cold metal cuffs snapping around his wrists. "Daniel Carter," one officer barked, "you are under arrest for child endangerment and domestic assault." The world tilted. "What the hell are you talking about?" Daniel roared, struggling. "I haven't. Where's my daughter?" A female officer stepped forward, her voice emotionless. An anonymous tip reported signs of abuse. "We're taking your daughter into protective custody pending investigation." "No," Daniel gasped, twisting against the cuffs, heart hammering in terror. "She needs me. She just survived a shooting." But it didn't matter. Not to them. Not tonight. The Monroes had played their most despicable card. They were going to steal Lily away. The holding cell stank of bleach and despair. Daniel sat on the narrow metal bench, fists clenched so tight the veins stood out on his forearms. Rage and terror warred inside him, each feeding the other, an endless loop of helplessness. He thought of Lily, alone, terrified, ripped from everything familiar just as she was beginning to heal. He thought of the system, slow, blind, indifferent, grinding them both into dust. No, he would not allow it. He would break out of this nightmare the only way he knew. Through. Hours blurred together until, at last, footsteps echoed down the hall. A new voice, firm but not hostile, called his name. He looked up to see Detective Sarah Moore, a woman he recognized from the hospital, the only one who had treated him with even a shred of decency. She held a file in one hand and a grim expression on her face. "Mr. Carter," she said, unlocking the cell. "Come with me." He followed her to a small interview room where she slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy, low-quality images clearly taken through a window. They showed Daniel helping Lily with her physical therapy exercises. Daniel massaging her stiff legs. Daniel supporting her as she tried to climb the front porch steps. Twisted, out of context, framed to look sinister. "This was submitted as evidence of abuse," Sarah said, disgust dripping from her voice. "But I pulled the hospital records, the physical therapy notes, the security footage from your porch cam you installed after the shooting." She leaned forward, eyes hard. "You're clean, Carter. Someone set you up." Daniel exhaled, tension bleeding from his shoulders, replaced by something colder, sharper. Focused hatred. "Can I see my daughter?" he asked, voice hoarse. Sarah hesitated. She's scared. "They put her in temporary foster care overnight, standard procedure until the claim is cleared. But now that you're exonerated, we'll bring her back." Daniel nodded, jaw clenched. "Good. Because I'm done playing defense." Sarah smiled grimly. "I figured you might say that." By the next evening, Lily was home, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, tear-stained but safe. Daniel tucked her into bed, promising her that no one would ever take her away again. Then he returned to the kitchen table, pulled out the battle plans he'd started sketching days ago, and began adjusting them. No more warning shots. No more polite letters. No more compromises. Karen Monroe had tried to destroy his life. Now, Daniel Carter would destroy her empire, piece by rotten piece. The time for patience was over. Daniel Carter stood before the cracked mirror in his bedroom, tying the cuffs of his shirt with mechanical precision. Every move deliberate. Every breath measured. Every nerve honed to razor sharpness. Tonight was the night. The night Karen Monroe would face her reckoning. The town hall auditorium buzzed with a kind of energy Daniel hadn't seen since returning from his last deployment, an edge of restless, angry anticipation. Rows of folding chairs filled fast. Neighbors who had once averted their gazes from Daniel now nodded grimly as he entered. Parents clutched manila folders full of evidence. Former allies of the Monroes whispered to each other, their faces tight with fear and guilt. At the front of the room, a battered wooden podium stood under harsh fluorescent lights. Behind it, a long table where the HOA board sat, pale, sweating, trying desperately to look composed. And in the center of it all, resplendent in a pearl-white suit that screamed desperate arrogance, sat Karen Monroe. She caught sight of Daniel and smiled. Not a friendly smile. The smile of a wolf cornered, but still convinced she could tear out a throat or two before the end. Daniel inclined his head slightly in return. A soldier's nod. The acknowledgement of a worthy, if despicable, adversary. Tonight, there would be no second chances. The meeting opened with the usual hollow rituals. Roll call, approval of minutes, procedural nonsense meant to stall, to sap momentum. But Daniel was ready. When the moderator droned, "Any new business?" he rose to his feet and walked steadily to the microphone. Every head in the room swiveled to follow him. Even Karen shifted slightly, one manicured hand tightening on her folder. Daniel set down a stack of documents, thick, damning, and cleared his throat. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said, voice carrying through the hushed auditorium. "Most of you know me as the father of Lily Carter, the 7-year-old who was shot 2 months ago in front of Franklin Elementary." Murmurs swept the room. "And tonight," Daniel continued, "I'm here to present evidence not only of gross misconduct by the HOA president, Karen Monroe, but of crimes that reach into the very institutions meant to protect our families." He clicked a remote. A screen flickered to life behind him, displaying the first slide. Karen's emails, vicious, cruel, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the words lit up in 10-foot-tall letters. That defective brat is ruining our neighborhood image. Who cares if she gets hurt? Karen rose half out of her chair, mouth open to object, but Daniel cut her off with a single, slicing gesture. You'll have your chance, he said coldly. Sit down. The room was dead silent. Karen sat. Slide after slide hammered home the reality. Misappropriated HOA funds for personal vacations. Illegal tampering with official records. Bribery tied directly to Robert Monroe's banking connections. Manipulation of law enforcement to target dissenters. Each revelation hit harder than the last, peeling away the layers of Karen's carefully cultivated facade. Neighbors who had once defended her now stared in open horror. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing too late they had hitched their wagons to a sinking star. But Daniel wasn't finished. He saved the best, or the worst, for last. The final slide showed a timeline. A detailed reconstruction of how Karen had orchestrated the false abuse allegations against Daniel to try and seize custody of Lily. Witness statements. Security footage. Phone records tying the anonymous tip directly to a burner phone purchased on Karen's credit card. An audible cry went up from somewhere in the crowd. Someone else shouted, "Arrest her." Chaos brewed, teetering on the edge of eruption. Karen shot to her feet, face red with fury. "This is slander," she shrieked. "These are lies. You people are just jealous of what Robert and I built." Daniel stepped back from the microphone, letting her words hang in the air. Ugly, desperate, damning. He didn't need to say anything more. She was digging her own grave faster than he ever could. Uniformed officers moved from the sides of the room. Detective Sarah Moore was among them, badge gleaming under the lights. "Karen Monroe," she said, voice clear and ringing, "you were under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice." Gasps broke into full-fledged shouts. Half the audience rose to their feet as Karen was handcuffed, shrieking and spitting like a wild animal. "You'll all regret this," she screamed as they dragged her away. "You need me. I'm the only thing keeping this place together." Daniel watched, unmoved, as the doors slammed shut behind her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone, maybe Tom, maybe another neighbor, began to clap. The sound spread like wildfire. A rising thunder of applause, stomping feet, cheering voices. It wasn't just a celebration of Karen's downfall. It was something deeper, something purer. It was a community taking itself back. Afterward, Daniel stepped outside into the cool night air. He looked up at the stars, feeling for the first time in months the tight band of fear around his chest loosen. This wasn't the end. There would be hearings, investigations, cleanup. But the monster that had haunted their town was gone. He thought of Lily, sleeping safely at home, her stuffed rabbit tucked against her side. He thought of the neighbors who had risked everything to stand up, to say enough. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Carter allowed himself a small, tired, but genuine smile. The war was over. And for once, the good guys had won. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a war zone and into a slow, uncertain peace. Karen Monroe's arrest sent shockwaves through Marigold Heights. News trucks rolled into the once quiet streets. Reporters knocked on doors, hungry for sound bites. Neighbors who had once mumbled excuses for the Monroes now spoke in loud, righteous tones about how they always knew something was wrong. Typical. Daniel had seen it before, in other wars, in other broken places, people surviving by rewriting their own memories. He didn't care. The important battles, the real ones, were happening elsewhere. Lily came home from school one afternoon, her backpack bouncing awkwardly against her walker, her smile shy but real. "Daddy," she called as she burst through the door, waving a crumpled piece of paper like a trophy. "Guess what?" Daniel knelt down, catching her as she nearly toppled over from excitement. "What is it, Lillipad?" he asked, grinning despite himself. "I'm the student speaker for the end-of-year assembly," she announced breathlessly. "Mrs. Taylor said they wanted someone who showed courage and heart this year. And they picked me." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. His throat closed up, hot and tight. He hugged her fiercely instead, pressing his face into her soft hair, breathing her in like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. "You earned it," he whispered. "You earned every bit of it." And she had. After everything, the shooting, the fear, the nightmares, Lily had refused to be broken. Her scar had faded to a pale line on her shoulder, a quiet reminder of what she had survived. But the real mark, the real change, was inside her. Steel hidden behind a sweet smile. A quiet strength that would outlast every monster life could throw at her. The night of the assembly, the auditorium was packed. Parents fanned themselves with programs. Teachers flitted nervously backstage. Children wriggled in folding chairs, dressed in their stiff best clothes. Daniel sat near the front, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. When Lily stepped onto the stage, the room fell into a hush so deep Daniel could hear his own breathing. She walked slowly but steadily to the podium, her pink walker gleaming under the stage lights. She looked so small, so impossibly brave. She cleared her throat, and when she spoke, her voice was clear, strong, steady. "A lot of people think being strong means you never get scared," she began. "But I think real strength is when you're scared and you keep going anyway. Last year, something really bad happened to me. Some people told me to stay quiet. Some people said it would be easier to just forget about it. But my daddy taught me that we don't stay quiet when bad things happen. We don't hide. We stand up. We tell the truth. Because when we stand together, bad things don't win." There was a pause, a breathless, charged silence, and then the entire auditorium rose to its feet, thundering applause echoing against the high ceilings. Daniel stood too, hand shaking, blinking hard against the sting in his eyes. She had done it. She had survived. And more than that, she had risen. In the weeks that followed, change rippled through Marigold Heights. The HOA board was overhauled, replaced with neighbors who actually cared about the people, not just property values. New rules were written, strict anti-harassment policies, financial transparency laws, protections for families with special needs. Karen Monroe and her husband lost everything, their house, their standing, their illusions of untouchability. Daniel never bothered to track where they fled to. He didn't care. Their reign was over. The community was healing. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Daniel and Lily sat on their battered front porch swing, sipping lemonade, the old boards creaking comfortingly under their combined weight. The summer breeze stirred the wind chimes. Somewhere down the street, kids played soccer, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Lily rested her head against Daniel's side, her hand loosely holding the worn ear of her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think people can change?" Daniel considered it. He thought of Karen, of the rot she had left behind. He thought of the neighbors who had turned away and then turned back, helping build something better. "Some can," he said finally. "Some want to. Some don't." Lily nodded solemnly, her brow furrowed in thought. "I think maybe the important thing isn't waiting for bad people to change," she said. "Maybe it's making sure good people don't give up." Daniel smiled, a real, deep smile that felt like sunlight breaking through long storm clouds. "You're smarter than me, kiddo," he said. She giggled, a sound so pure it made his heart ache in the best possible way. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Daniel realized something. The war might be over, but the fight for kindness, for decency, for justice, that never really ended. It lived on in every choice, every small stand, every moment of courage. And as long as Lily Carter had breath in her body, and he had breath in his, they would always, always keep fighting. Together.